Hello and welcome to The Top Story, a podcast with the headlines of the day from our correspondents around the world. I'm Qizhi. Coming up in this edition, Israel has accused Iran of violating a ceasefire by initiating a new round of attacks, but Tehran has denied the claim. European Union foreign ministers have met to address the urgent need for de-escalation between Iran and the United States ahead of the NATO summit. And China is to hold a military parade in Beijing on September 3rd to mark the 80th anniversary of the victory in the war against Japanese aggression and the World Anti-Fascist War. We begin with the Middle East. Israel has accused Iran of violating a US proposed ceasefire by initiating a new round of attacks, but Iranian state media has denied the claim. The Israeli military said it intercepted a pair of missiles launched from Iran. Defense Minister Israel Katz has vowed to respond with intense strikes against Tehran. The latest development comes shortly after Israel officially agreed to a US proposed ceasefire, citing a completion of its military objectives. US President Donald Trump earlier claimed that a ceasefire between Iran and Israel was in effect and called on both sides not to violate it. But the Iranian foreign minister denied the claim, saying there would be no cessation of hostilities unless Israel stopped its attacks. Jim Spellman has more on the deal.
His Truth Social platform, U.S. President Donald Trump wrote this, quote, "It has been fully agreed by and between Israel and Iran that there will be a complete and total ceasefire in approximately 6 hours from now when Israel and Iran have wound down and completed their in-progress final missions for 12 hours, at which point the war will be considered ended." Trump seems to also imply that Iran will stop its attacks first for 12 hours, and then Israel will stop its attacks for 12 hours, still awaiting details on how exactly this proposed ceasefire would work. Trump brands the conflict the 12-day war and wrote, quote, "This is a war that could have gone on for years and destroyed the entire Middle East, but it didn't and never will." Trump's announcement comes just hours after Iran launched an attack targeting the Al Udeid air base outside Doha, the forward headquarters for U.S. Central Command. No reports of injuries there at this point. Iran's military says the missile strikes were in retaliation for the U.S. attacks on Iranian nuclear facilities over the weekend, and that the number of missiles used matched the number of bombs the U.S. used in the attacks over the weekend, and notes that the base targeted is far from urban infrastructure and residential areas and posed no threat to Qatar. The attack was seen in Washington as a way for Iran to respond without escalating the conflict, and Trump indicated earlier Monday that the U.S. wouldn't retaliate, setting the stage for Trump's ceasefire. In an interview Monday evening, Vice President Vance says the U.S. believes Iran is now incapable of building a nuclear weapon after the U.S. attacks over the weekend.
That was Jim Spellman in Washington, D.C. The Iranian Parliamentary Security Committee has approved a bill to suspend all cooperation with the UN nuclear watchdog, including inspections and surveillance, unless the country receives concrete guarantees of the agency's professional behavior. The bill still awaits a full parliamentary vote. The International Atomic Energy Agency has held a crisis meeting in Vienna focusing on the US bombing of Iranian nuclear sites. The IAEA director says the bombing of the Fordo plant may have caused significant damage, though it is too early to tell the extent of it. China's envoy to the IAEA also strongly condemned the US strike and expressed deep concern over the negative impact of the attack on regional stability. Johannes Pleschberger has more from Vienna.
Well, it's actually a bit difficult for the IAEA to assess the exact situation at these nuclear facilities in Iran that have been targeted by Israeli and US forces, even though the IAEA inspectors are on the ground. As the IAEA told us here in Vienna, they do not have access to these nuclear facilities simply because they're still being targeted. Reportedly, Israeli forces struck access routes to the Fordo nuclear site in Iran, and this Fordo nuclear site is also a site that has suffered, as expected, very significant damage, as the IAEA's chief Rafael Grossi told us today. So basically, the IAEA is relying on information coming from Iranian officials in order to assess what's going on at these nuclear facilities. Let's listen to what Rafael Grossi told us.
Iran has informed the IAEA that there was no increase in off-site radiation levels at all 3 sites. The situation at the other sites remain as I have described in my past updates.
So while IAEA Chief Rafael Grossi is calling for all parties to cease attacks in order to make inspectors return to these facilities and assess the situation, Iran is saying that the IAEA failed to prevent these attacks. It failed to take actions. Just earlier, the Iranian mission to the IAEA here in Vienna said on Twitter that not only the US and Israel will bear consequences for these attacks, but also the IAEA Director General Rafael Grossi and other European nations will bear consequences for what is happening in Iran. So Iran is disappointed, even angry. Reza Najafi, the Iranian ambassador to the IAEA, also told us that the IAEA is no longer considered functioning by some member states, he claims. But we've heard from a source inside this meeting that there have been conflicting views. So no majority, it seems, was found to issue an official statement here in Vienna.
That was Johannes Pleshberger in Vienna. In Europe, European Union foreign ministers have met to address the urgent need for de-escalation between Iran and the United States. The emergency meeting came ahead of the NATO summit. Members of the alliance are hoping to appease Washington by agreeing to expand their defense budgets. Sarah Coates has more from The Hague.
Fears of further escalation between the US and Iran continue to mount here in Europe in the wake of Sunday's attacks by the US on Iranian nuclear facilities and Iran responding, firing missiles at US bases in Qatar and Iraq. Foreign ministers from the bloc are desperately calling on Tehran to return to the negotiating table, ringing the alarm bells over what is turning into an extremely dangerous period ahead.
We made it very clear to the Iranian side back then that a real prerequisite for a settlement of the conflict is that Iran is prepared to negotiate directly with the USA.
Another focus of discussion, the EU's relationship with Israel, after the European Union said there are indications that Israel is in breach of human rights obligations over its conduct in Gaza.
Our first goal is to change the situation on the ground and help the humanitarian aid to get in and help the people. So today was the beginning of the debate and not the end.
Starting Tuesday, The Hague is hosting this year's NATO summit, held in the backdrop of an extremely volatile time.
Obviously, the NATO summit itself will really concentrate, first of all, on the Euro-Atlantic. Probably people will talk in the meetings and also between leaders about what is happening now with Iran, because this is obviously a huge development.
The two-day event has prompted one of the largest security operations in Dutch history, with many parts of the city completely blocked off, frigates patrolling the North Sea, more than 27,000 police deployed, and helicopters and fighter jets flying overhead.
That was Sarah Coates reporting. In the Americas, once one of South America's poorest nations, Guyana is now undergoing an economic transformation of historic proportions. Fueled by a massive oil boom, the country has risen to the top of global GDP growth rankings. But as fortunes rise, so too do the questions. Is this a new beginning or a new burden? Lei Xiangping reports from the capital, Georgetown.
Guyana's GDP has skyrocketed from just over $5 billion in 2019 to an estimated $27.4 billion in 2024. A five-fold increase in just 5 years. In 2024 alone, the country posted a growth rate of 43.6%, the fastest in the world. In the capital, Georgetown, the change is visible and rapid. High-rises cut into the skyline, luxury hotels welcome global guests, and new highways crisscross the city.
And from what I've seen with the infrastructure in Guyana, everything looks blooming, it looks wonderful. I'm impressed. Very, very, very good, because I've seen a lot of big buildings. When I was a child, we didn't have these, certain things, but now it's available, and I hope that they will grasp the opportunity, and I hope that there'll be opportunity for everyone from every spectrum of life.
There's a lot of building going on in Guyana right now, and I just hope that it is done in a tasteful and sustainable way. I think that it can if it continues to invest in its people. People are the backbone of a fast-growing economy, and in order for everybody to share in the benefits of the economic growth, it's important that people have the skills necessary to participate in a fast-changing economy.
To keep the momentum going, the Guyanese government has rolled out a slate of infrastructure projects, new hospitals, power grid upgrades, and a national gas-to-energy initiative. Among the most high-profile is the new Demerara River Bridge, a 2.9-kilometer cable-stayed span being built by China Railway Construction Corporation. With a $260 million price tag, it will be the first of its kind in the Caribbean, complete with lanes for cars, cyclists, and pedestrians. It's scheduled to open later this year.
Like every morning, right, the commuter from the west has to wait, as you say, 3, sometimes maybe 4 hours just to reach over to the east bank. And then there's additional traffic, the volume of traffic leaving the west. There's additional traffic now to head to Georgetown, the capital city of Guyana, right? So with this infrastructure in place, there's a new highway that the government recently constructed called Heroes Highway. So this bridge will link to Heroes Highway, allowing commuters who are going directly to Georgetown to use this route, because this route can facilitate a larger volume of traffic as per the existing East Bank public road. It is going to reduce the waiting time and allow commuters to leave, have some extra sleep in the morning. They will be very happy.
The oil windfall is also lifting other sectors. Luis Holder, who runs a local coffee business, says higher incomes and changing lifestyles are brewing new demand.
We see a light at the end of the tunnel because there are companies, international franchises now moving into the country as a result of its oil wealth. Franchises such as Starbucks. Now, as more Guyanese start using coffee from these franchises, they will tend to have a preference for brewed coffee, and so we feel they will support our product in the supermarkets. In addition to that, what we found is that there's a number of local cafes springing out of the country, and we expect that we will be the provider of coffee to these local cafes as we provide to the existing local cafes throughout the country.
But while prosperity grows, so do concerns about inequality. In southern Guyana, ecotourism entrepreneur Melanie McTurk welcomes the economic lifts, but warns that not everyone is sharing in the gains.
Guyana is now a country where millionaires are being made overnight, but that is a small minority. Certainly, there are a lot of people who have been able to advance their careers, have opportunities for training, and so that they've never had before. At the same time, I've also seen a lot of people who are frustrated because they feel left out of the system, or people who feel that they're being left behind because they don't understand how to be part of that new economy. And I would add also that I think there's also a growing sense of frustration because of the increased cost of living. So we've seen a significant increase in the cost of living.
These concerns reflect a familiar warning in resource-rich economies, the so-called Dutch disease, where dependence on oil or gas distorts other sectors and drives up costs. President Irfan Ali insists that won't happen here. In a recent speech, he said, oil is a blessing, not a curse, and pledged that the government remains focused on economic diversification. As cranes rise and fortune shifts, Guyana stands at a crossroads, a country moving full speed into the future, but looking carefully over its shoulder. Whether this boom builds a foundation or exposes a fault line may depend not on what lies underground, but how wisely it is used above it.
That was Lei Xiangping reporting. Finally, in Asia, China will hold a military parade in Beijing to mark the 80th anniversary of the victory in the Chinese People's War of Resistance against Japanese aggression and World Anti-Fascist War. President Xi Jinping will review the troops and deliver a speech during the parade in Tiananmen Square on September 3rd. The parade will display new types of combat forces. This is the second time China will hold a military parade to commemorate the victory of the war against Japanese aggression following the first one in 2015. Zhou Jiaxing has details.
China this September will hold a grand military parade as a part of the commemoration activities celebrating the victory of the World War II 80 years ago.
This military parade aims to highlight the historical status of the Chinese People's War of Resistance against Japanese aggression as the main battlefield in the east of the World Anti-Fascist War, as well as a significant contribution to the victory of the World Anti-Fascist War. It demonstrates the central role of the Communist Party of China in the war of resistance against Japanese aggression, and will showcase China's responsibility and commitment to resolutely safeguarding the achievements of the World War II victory, including international fairness and justice, and actively promoting the building of a community with a shared future for mankind.
At Beijing's Tiananmen Square, the People's Liberation Army and the armed police would join the troop, equipment, and aircraft echelon formations. All the equipment is homegrown and currently in service. The parade will also include new types of combat forces, including unmanned intelligence, underwater, and hypersonic combat. Foreign dignitaries and militaries from countries that participate in the fight alongside the Chinese people will be invited to the commemoration activities. Chinese President Xi Jinping will then deliver a keynote speech.
The theme of the event is Remember History, Honor the Martyrs, Cherish Peace, and Create the Future. It is necessary to remember the struggle of the Chinese people, pay tribute to the heroic martyrs who sacrificed their lives and those who contributed to the war, declare the position and determination of the Chinese people to unswervingly follow the path of peaceful development and unswervingly safeguard world peace, draw wisdom and strength from history to move forward and open up a brighter future.
Medals marking the 80th anniversary of the victory will be awarded to surviving veterans and senior comrades in arms of the war, as well as to the families of deceased soldiers. Anti-war-themed campaigns, academic discussions, bell ringing, and other commemorative activities will be carried out across the nation in the second half of the year. Lasting from 1931 to 1945, the Chinese People's War of Resistance against Japanese aggression began the earliest and lasted the longest, resulting in heavy losses.
This year also marks the 80th anniversary of Taiwan's restoration to China, and Chinese President Xi Jinping during his May visit to Moscow for the victory said the restoration of Taiwan is a victorious outcome and also the integral part of the post-war international order, emphasizing that any attempt to deny this outcome or to defame the historic contribution of China to the Soviet Union is doomed to fail.
That was Zhou Jiaxing reporting. Now, recapping today's headlines, Israel has accused Iran of violating a ceasefire by initiating a new round of attacks, but Tehran has denied the claim. European Union foreign ministers have met to address the urgent need for de-escalation between Iran and the United States ahead of the NATO summit. And China is to hold a military parade in Beijing in September to mark the 80th anniversary of the victory in the war against Japanese aggression and a World Anti-Fascist War. And that's it for this edition of The Top Story, a podcast that brings you world headlines every weekday. For more news in politics, business, sports and culture, you can subscribe to the Beijing Hour, a one-hour podcast news magazine program. We welcome and appreciate all ratings and reviews. I'm Qi Zhi. Thank you for listening.